You must have heard of hantavirus. It is said that the mortality rate after infection is 40 to 50%. And we all have a huge question in our minds. Will we experience another corona? To answer this question, there are 4 things we need to know. What are they? Is hantavirus, which we discovered more than 70 years ago, but it is spreading in our current day. How does an epidemic actually spread? Is it possible the viruses are manufactured? And finally, we will reach the answer to the most important question: will we experience another epidemic again? This is one of the strangest things humans used to use. Do you know about the plague? Surely the Black Death. This epidemic spread more than once throughout history and killed millions of people. But when it spread in the 17th century, doctors made this mask, the plague doctor mask. Do you know why? At that time, they didn't know that there was something called the virus or bacteria or all those things. They believed that diseases were transmitted by bad smells. They would take this mask and put mint, lavender, herbs, and a sponge soaked in vinegar in it. So when they smelled the bad odor from here, it would go through all those herbs, turn into a pleasant scent, and that way they could handle the disease. Now, yeah, they weren't stupid. They certainly hadn't reached the level of science we have today. But I want to make the point here. I imagine many of you didn't know this fact, and many are afraid of this mask because it looks very scary. Our general knowledge about epidemics is very poor. Most of us don't have to learn about them, and that's wrong. Usually what makes disasters worse is your ignorance of the disaster, and I will prove to you that after watching this video, your opinion about hantavirus will change completely. Not having enough information about something is sometimes very scary. Ignorance is not always bliss. They made a trend, as they say. So now for hantavirus, a birth. I know many of you are afraid of the idea of another epidemic. Sure feels life-stopping. I also know that many people are excited about the idea of an epidemic to start a creed on TikTok and become TikTokers. They might dance on TikTok. Many people succeeded with that darn crap. Many people started YouTube during Corona in 2020, and it's a career that works. Honestly, it works on, but let's get into the subject now. What is hantavirus? What do you know about it? We all heard about this ship, a ship at sea where people got sick, and somehow this honestly reminded me of the events of 2020, that we heard about a case of a person who got sick in that region in China and ate the bats. And we said, oh no, it's very far from us. After that, little by little, we started seeing cases here and there. We see videos of people walking and suddenly falling and dying. There are numbers saying that the mortality rate after infection is 40 to 50%. For the coronavirus, the probability was 1 to 2%. So you understand the difference, but now the discrepancy in those numbers. And now, little by little, this will become clear to us more. On April 4, 2026, a month ago, a ship named MV Hondia set off on a 33-day voyage, Okada. The plan was for the crew to pass through the most isolated places in the world. Now, this ship, what distinguishes this ship is its ability to withstand polar conditions. With its route goes to places that regular ships cannot reach. A strong ship, a super ship. So it begins its journey from the Antarctica, a normal tourist trip. 5 days pass and one of the passengers starts to get sick. A 70-year-old man. He got a fever, nausea, fatigue, diarrhea, back pain, and bone pain. And everyone thought it was a normal illness, but 5 days later, the man died. And everyone's reaction was natural too. Then he was an old man, tired, who knows what his health condition was. He passed away, that's it. So the man's body stays on the ship. There is nowhere to take it. Days pass and we reach April 24. They reach an island called St. Helena and they offload the man's body. And his wife also gets off on the island. These are very normal events. So the wife of the man who died takes a flight the next day to South Africa. She has health conditions, respiratory conditions. She has normal illnesses like any elderly person, but there is no reason to tell anyone anything. No one knows about any disease. No one warned anyone. And after a 7-hour flight, she arrives in South Africa and dies in a hospital. That plane had 88 people on it. If there were contagious disease, she boarded a plane with 88 people. After she died at that same time on the ship, symptoms started appearing, and some people, they started feeling sick. So it seems like something is wrong, right? One of the people who got sick on the ship, a British man, his condition worsened. So they evacuated him from the ship on April 27th to go to South Africa for treatment. He arrived at the hospital in intensive care. They kept running tests on him, and in the end, the test came back positive, that he was infected with a virus called hantavirus. So the ship continues its journey. On May 2, someone died on the ship, and on May 4th, the World Health Organization announced there were cases of this disease. It became official news, so at this point, the subject starts to become trendy. People start hearing about it, people start fearing that a new pandemic might occur, and conspiracies start to emerge. Of course, that I found the creators of this disease, or that there is a conspiracy. I saw that every 6 years a pandemic emerges, and they show you numbers like that. This year, Ebola emerged. This year, swine flu emerged. Listen, we will get to all these conspiracies. We will get to the conspiracy part. And I don't know if this reached you or not, but it's called the hantavirus, a virus. In Hebrew, hanta means fake, implying it's not a real virus, a false virus. That in the end, the occupation created this virus. It's a manufactured virus. I don't know if this conspiracy theory reached you, but one question. If a country were to come up with a conspiracy virus, would it name it a false virus? Would it name it an unreal virus? In Hebrew, it would be called hunter balay. Honestly, sometimes conspiracies require to just think a little bit. Why would they do that? Let's go back to the days of the Korean War between 1951 and 1953. Suddenly, a strange, terrifying disease began to strike UN soldiers, and it infected more than 3,000 soldiers. So what were the symptoms they were having? High fever, internal bleeding, kidney failure. Scary, right? More than 3,000 soldiers were infected, and a state of terror spread among them. Virus is deadly. The rate I told you about 40 to 50% chance of deaths. This was during that specific period. And here, it became known as the Korean hemorrhagic fever. And what was the first conclusion they reached? The same conclusion people have reached now in 2024. Unfortunately, since they were at war, they expected this was a biological weapon created by the Soviet Union or North Korea. And this disease is not a disease. It is a weapon to kill these people. Nowadays, we know of what a virus, bacteria, and microbes are. And these tiny things, how they work and how diseases spread, we shouldn't believe it's a biological weapon. More than 20 years pass with no one understand the cause of the disease. It's like a boast. People keep dying and no one knows where it came from. This is where our story's hero comes in, named Ho Ho Weng Lee, a virologist from South. But they also discovered something strange about this virus. It transmits from animals to humans, not from humans to humans. And there is a huge difference, and this is the pivotal difference in the... So how did this virus, which doesn't transmit between humans, become a virus that transmits between humans, and we swatted it on a Sheppy? Now you will see the evolution of this virus. Imagine this part of the video as well. I know it's not the best analogy in the world. We humans, for instance, are a billion people. Everyone wants to become very successful, a billionaire, and stand out. Imagine that in the world of viruses, you could be a small, insignificant virus. And your goal is to become a massive virus that matters, and you've created an epidemic. You've created a company worth billions of dollars. This example will be very useful to us, you and this tiny undervalued virus. Okay, maybe just a little bit more of an epidemiologist than you are because I'm on YouTube, but not by much. And now, I won't tell you a sequence that shows you how Hanta spread. In 1993, most doctors were convinced that hantaviruses only existed in Asia and Europe. But it didn't reach beyond that. But in that year, 93, a 19-year-old guy suddenly died in America from respiratory failure. The guy ran marathons. The least likely person to have respiratory failure had respiratory failure. The doctors were amazed. They wondered how that happened. They started running tests trying to understand how he died. His health was fine. The illness hit, he couldn't breathe, and he died as soon as he reached the hospital. And they discovered that many deaths of this kind were happening suddenly without explanation. Young people in perfect health, but they were dying and suspected the plague, influenza. They checked for diseases, everything was negative. And here we have a new disease classification, hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, HPS. And will it reach here? Will it become a successful virus and turn into an epidemic? And what are its success factors anyway? What allows a small, trivial virus like your own not to spread? Stop. Before you continue, hit subscribe so you can keep watching the content and support this beautiful content. And because I have 5 million subscribers, we're going to give away a card just like that for no reason. Yeah, keep going, but subscribe first, like the video, comment, make a nice gesture. Anyway, then we go to 2012. That one was huge in California at a national park. There were camping cabins for people to stay in. 10 cases of hantavirus, 3 of them died. Almost the same numbers we have in our current day. In our current day, we have 11 cases, 3 of them died. The same numbers. After investigating the matter, they didn't understand what would bring Hunter there. They looked at the cabins the residents were living in. They found they were designed in a way that let mice get in and live inside. The mice got in, lived inside, and left laced in droppings. I don't know if you know, but mice leaves things everywhere they go, like their feces. Exactly. So when they dried, they started traveling through the air in the places where people slept. They had to send alerts to more than 260,000 visitors to the park. And they demolished all the contaminated cabins, and that was it. But this isn't the final boss of the hantavirus. We moved to 2018. We built a base until now that the hantavirus and transmission is between animals and humans. But remember this diagram. There was a virus from the hanta strain called Andes. That strain was exceptional. A man in a small village in Argentina went to a birthday party while infected. And there was a lot of contact. I mean, we're talking about very close contact with each other. And there was a lot of aerosol. The most important point in hanta is the aerosol, and we'll get to that now. But at that time, there were 34 cases and 11 deaths. There was no cure for the matter. There still isn't a cure. So the authorities had to start isolating those who had contact at that party to try to control its spread. It kept spreading from that time until we saw it in our current day on the Virgin ship. This is the Andes hantavirus that transmits from human to human. But how this happens in the first place is very interesting. So let's go back to our example, because this example is very important for our topic. Viruses are considered not living organisms and cannot reproduce on their own. No babies, okay? But some scientists disagree on this because viruses have a unique property. They reproduce when they are inside what we call a victim. A virus enters inside a human. Let's say it bypassed all your immune system stages. It reaches your cells. Now, what does the virus do? It goes, for example, to excelling your body, and it uses its resources to reproduce. Imagine a stray cat came inside your house. You have a cat. It used your house resources to reproduce. It does the same thing. I don't know if I clarify it with the example anyway, but it doesn't always reproduce into something identical. For sure, the father doesn't always look like the son. So let's say the father, let's call it the father. It transmits from animals to humans. Then, literally by mistake, it's a mistake, a mutation, a DMO deformity. A deformed version came out that transmits from human to human. Here is where natural selection happens. If it can stay alive, if it's a stronger strain, it'll stay alive, it spread more. Then we have a strain of it. So, Omar, why do we take this lesson about viruses? Now back to the Andes strain. The strain we are dealing with now from the hantavirus. What makes it dangerous? And what does it actually do? And how does it spread? And does this mean it will become an epidemic or not? This strain is what we know to be the most dangerous and widespread, because it's the only known hantavirus strain so far capable of human-to-human transmission. Now, how long is the incubation period for viruses in your body? It reaches 6 weeks, maybe more, and the symptoms in the first stage are like a normal flu, but the dangerous symptoms start after 4 to 10 days. They include coughing and shortness of breath. The lungs fill with fluid, which may lead to respiratory failure. And as I told you, according to the WHO, the mortality rate is 40 to 50%. Do these numbers apply to what is happening now? No, let's do the math together. And keep in mind 40 to 50% as a very high rate compared to other viruses. For example, ones we know, COVID was about 2%. But that's after it spread around the planet. When it was only in Wuhan, China, the rate was 17%. Ebola reached a 90% mortality rate. But where is Ebola now? So this number alone doesn't reflect the spread of the virus. This is just a number. Yes, sure, it's how much it can kill a person. What you would discover shortly is that the spread of the virus is the opposite of this number. Corona, one of the main reasons for its spread is this number, that it is low. Yes, the equation is inverse. Now, before we get into how we create an epidemic and how our virus could upgrade and become an epidemic, we must know 3 very important terms that describe the spread of diseases, because epidemic is not always the correct word and people use them quite loosely. But no, there's a fundamental difference. So first we have an outbreak, which is when a disease spreads in a small geographical area. In this case, the numbers exceed normal expectations. For example, a rare virus we don't always see spreads in a hospital, or a virus spreads on a ship. This is called an outbreak, limited to one place at its. Then we have an epidemic. An epidemic is when it's no longer confined to a small area and the disease starts spreading in a larger area, like a city or even an entire country starts to see the disease spread. And an epidemic doesn't necessarily have to be infectious, but what happened is that it spread a lot in a specific country. For instance, it became an epidemic. After that, we have a pandemic, or kit, which is what corona is, a pandemic. Corona is not an epidemic. Corona is a pandemic when it crosses the borders of a country. It started spreading between country, it spreads between continents. It spreads in a crazy way. Here we have become a pandemic. So we have outbreak in a small area, an epidemic at the country level, a larger area, a pandemic at the level of the world, the plague, the Spanish flu, corona. They were all pandemics, not epidemics. And pandemic is a massive word. And as for the number of pandemics that have happened in our lives on the planet, it is considered relatively very small. Not everything in the world becomes a pandemic. And not every virus even becomes an epidemic. Usually most things are outbreaks, relatively speaking. But how does a virus actually spread? And what are the factors of its success in spreading? How can a virus become an outbreak and become an epidemic or become a pandemic? Let's go into our story in 98. In this period, within 2 years, between 50 and 100 million people died. A huge number of people. World War I didn't have that many deaths, all because of a virus. One virus spread and became a pandemic. It took more of the population from the earth than a world war. A virus we later started calling the Spanish flu. Now, the world at that time was in the First World War, and the soldiers' living conditions were not the best. We're talking millions. Soldiers living in trenches. They weren't eating well, cold and dirt. A war environment, we mean. And suddenly, a disease started spreading. They thought it was normal, just the flu. What could it be? Cold, high fever. They started coughing up blood, spitting blood, and their faces turned blue from lack of oxygen. And it was normal for someone to be alive in the morning and dead by night, and they still didn't realize what was happening. One of the most dangerous pandemics in history. But where is the point here? Beyond needing a virus with spreading characteristics, you need human conditions that allow the virus to spread. But this pandemic, I tell you, killed 50 to 100 million people. And the main reason so many people died was the conditions they were living. Conditions that allowed this to happen. The conditions we live in now are completely different. So this is one of the factors. Now let's look at the viral factors in spreading. First, does it transmit easily between humans? And the most dangerous viruses are those that transmit through respiration. Corona was greatly aided in its spread by the fact that it transmits through respiration. Second, how fast it changes genetically, how it mutates. And you know how we build our immunity. If the virus keeps changing, our immunity won't keep up with it. So it'll become more dangerous to humans and more likely to spread. Third, how much immunity do we have to it? Has the immune system been exposed to it or not? Did we acquire immunity from our parents if they were exposed to it? And put aside the idea that it might be a new virus, yet no one has been exposed to it, no one has immunity to it yet. That's the most dangerous case, and we don't have a cure for it yet. And fourth, we have the fact that it spreads before symptoms appear. And that's nasty, meaning you can pass the disease to someone else before you even know you're sick. And that is what used to happen with corona. One of the studies on COVID found that 9% of cases were known weak cases were transmitted by people who didn't know they had the disease. This property is very dangerous. It could be the difference between a pandemic and a very normal outbreak. It explains why COVID became a pandemic, why the Spanish flu became a pandemic, why the plague became a pandemic, but it also explains why Ebola, which had a 90% death rate, didn't reach pandemic stage, even though it's a very deadly virus. But there is something that explains it a bit more. And this thing will really help us determine if we'll see another pandemic or not. Something they call the virulence transmissibility trade-off. It's a very complex name, I know. It's a beautiful thing in our context right now, yeah. But generally, it's something a bit... If you look at it, it's something sad. Basically, it says that the higher the death rate of the virus, the more deadly the virus, the less it spreads. Sin is a good spreads, because it kills the person who caught the disease before they have time to spread it to others. The biggest example of this, as I told you, is Ebola, but also hantavirus. And in the first case we talked about that happened on the ship, within 4 or 5 days of the man feeling symptoms, he lost his life. Now that's why I told you, as a principle, you can look at it from two perspectives, a glass half empty and a glass half full. Virus, on the other hand, is harder to transmit than COVID. The difference between hantavirus and COVID in this regard is simply, I won't delve deep into the science behind it. Imagine the virus chooses a spot in your body and decides this is its satellite, that from here will broadcast. So COVID takes areas close to the outside world, and this is the reality. Though the virus spreads from there through ways like coughing, like breathing in someone else's face, things that are very easy to transmit, hantavirus takes a satellite deeper in the body and further from the outside world. It destroys the body from the inside more, and its spread outward depends on saliva the most, on spit, So the probability of it spreading, from what I understood, is lower. Of course, don't take what I'm saying as medical opinion, but this is all based on the research we've done. The idea of what happened on the ship in the first place is that there are 147 people on a ship. Don't people. We are talking about enclosed space, common ventilation systems. We are talking about a ship, after all, with shared dining halls. They stayed together for over a month in the same place. Yes. There were elderly people there, but only 11 out of 147 were infected, and those who were had confirmed reactions, meaning they dealt with the first people who brought the disease to them. It wasn't random, not airborne or anything like that. No, they know how it reached these individuals. So from what I see and what we researched, it turns out it's less contagious than corona. Its epidemic spread factors are not strong compared to corona. Most people who are making up conspiracies nowadays about hantavirus are people trying to link a pattern they saw with corona to a pattern they see now. But reality tells a completely different story. But there is this point I always like to repeat when it comes to conspiracies. We have a full video about conspiracies and why we believe in them. And it will clarify a lot as to why conspiracies spread so much during times like this But there is a very important point, and I've said it in more than one video. My dear one, you who come up with conspiracies or believe in them, having a conspiracy on the level of something like a virus or a pandemic, no matter what, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for one very logical reason. The numbers game. How many people have to keep this secret from everyone around them, their loved ones and friends, for this conspiracy to live and work? How many people conspired to create a pandemic? How many people conspired? One person is impossible. You're talking about a disease, but a virus. We're talking about at least thousands of people who contributed to creating it. This is no longer something to pin it. So the existence of a conspiracy of this magnitude in our current life is impossible. The number. They tell you it's impossible. I mean, even one of the conspiracies that came up regarding the hantavirus says that the people on the ship knew about this conspiracy that was supporting it. What do you mean? That 140 people from random backgrounds scattered from all of the world conspired to support the idea of terrifying people about the virus? How is that logical? I mean, it's not rational at all. The goal here, of course, isn't to tell people not to be careful. Always take care of your personal hygiene. Always be mindful of those small things that make a difference. But I'm speaking from the perspective that some people are getting terrified. Some people are getting scared every day when they see the news. Some people intentionally create content that scares others, especially when things like this happen. So the only goal of everything we discuss, this is for you to have some knowledge to hold on to when someone talks about this virus in front of you. Nothing more, nothing less. Well, that's it. I hope this video is helpful to you in any way. Watch these two videos. They're very good.